Hello, welcome to the virtual conference of Teaching Leaders on Leadership through Classics. My name is Maria Xantu and I teach Classics at the University of Leeds in the UK. The title of my presentation is How to Teach Leadership as Empowered and Enacted Inquiry through Critical Pedagogy, and the use of doxa gnome in Herodotus and Isocrates. And I will discuss the interface of two knowledge acquirement and political discourse theories. Herodotus' use of gnome in the framework of his definition of history as enacted inquiry, and Isocrates' use of doxa as one of the main notions in his rhetorical program of education. So I'll start with Isocrates, though a chronologically later author, because he will provide us with some perspective and a theoretical background which is more familiar to us. In ancient Greek culture, excellence, arete, in managing one's own and state affairs, leading to human happiness and fulfillment through wisdom, is a much professed aim. To take one example, in the 5th century BCE, despite the variety of their specific doctrines, sophists had political success as their main educational goal through philosophically relativistic teaching. Although a student of the sophists himself, Isocrates formed his own philosophical training and educational program, conceptualized as logon paideia. And though he professed the same goal as the sophists did, he presented his mission statement with a predominantly ethical component lying at the core of his teaching. Not only to produce leaders of high morale, but to provide counsel and advice on matters of civic importance, but also to support and promote his audience's self-understanding as civic agents. This hands-on approach is aligned with his notion of philosophy, focusing on the cultivation of practical wisdom through the production of ethical civic discourse. So, if we interpret the phrase logon paideia in the wider framework of his philosophy, we are to think of it as the ability to speak well, which in turn reflects and is a product of the ability to think well and shrewdly about practical matters. As mentioned earlier, Isocrates' rhetorical program promoted civic education in the stochastic arts of politics through logos politikos. To achieve this goal, Isocrates employed doxa as an essential concept of his program. In this presentation, I shall confine myself in a passage from the famous Antithesis speech, passages 183-184. I quote, "Those whose concern is philosophy pass on to their pupils all the structures which speech, logos, employs. When they have given them experience and detailed knowledge of these, they again exercise the students and make them accustomed to hard work, and then force them to synthesize everything they have learned in order that they may have a more secure understanding, and their views, doxa, may be better adapted to the right moments, kairoi. It is not possible to learn this through study, since in all activities these opportune moments elude exact knowledge, episteme." What we realize in this passage is how Isocrates connects doxa with kairos, thus bringing us closer to the modern definition of leadership and its challenges as Norman Sundred defines them. I quote, "Leadership is the art of significantly or crucially causing another living creature or group to participate in the achievement of a goal that is in the interest of that group, though it may also be in the interest of the leader." Unquote. According to Norman Sundridge's definition, the leader has three main challenges. First, to know or figure out what is actually in the interest of the group. B, to be good at enlisting the participation of the group, often by force of character, charm, eloquence, or delegated authority, and C, to determine how to reconcile the interests of the group with the leader's own interests or motives for leading. The question to ask is why doxa and kairos are so prominent features and why it is so important that Isocrates brings those two together. In order to understand the association of doxa and kairos with leadership and decision making, we have to take into account the emphasis Isocrates lays on correlating the situation particularity with the community's accepted norms and beliefs. This assessment of particular cases from the perspective of the community's values and commitments corresponds to bringing the community's doxa into closer proximity to kairos, the opportune moment. If doxa is combined with phronesis, which denotes practical intelligence acquired through practical expediency in stochastic art, then deliberation equates to a pronounced conjecture that is equivalent to, I quote, a judgment which is sound and capable of hitting the right course of action, unquote. Since he explains his notion of doxa as judgment through conjecture in On the Peace, passage 28, and a wise person is someone who, I quote, possesses a judgment which is accurate in meeting occasions as they arise and rarely misses the expedient course of action, unquote, he manages to make the inequality of leadership compatible with the democratic equality of the audience in terms of voting as the ultimate means of decision making. And I quote, "Whom then do I call educated, since I exclude the arts and science and specialties? First, those who manage well the circumstances which they encounter day by day, and who possess a judgment which is accurate in meeting occasions as they arise and rarely misses the expedient course of action." This passage comes from Panathinaikos 30. According to traditional belief, shared also by other orators contemporary to Isocrates, the world of politics and the domain of human affairs altogether are characterized by change, ambiguity, and contingency. Thus, his educational and rhetorical program promoted civic education in the stochastic art of politics, as I mentioned earlier. Given this framework, Isocrates considered logos to be a means for political deliberation through constituting and affecting social relations. Antithesis 183-184, I read earlier, offers us an eloquent insight of how he defines doxa. The important element in this definition is that due to the fluidity in the domain of human affairs, citizens as agents seeking to deal with precariousness and contingency must in each case consider what is appropriate to the occasion. This assessment of particular cases from the perspective of the community's values and commitments corresponds to bringing the community's doxa into closer proximity to kairos. Accordingly, as Poulakos notes, and I quote, "The orator's challenge is to secure the audience's identification with the community's accepted beliefs and traditions in a new situation, a situation whose relation to traditional norms is questionable, whose meaning is open-ended, and whose significance is equivocal." Leaving aside Isocrates' doxa for the time being, I would like to discuss Herodotus' use of gnome, meaning opinion. And I would invite you to consider this with me. The ancient historian Herodotus is one of early Greek prose writers and largely considered as the father of history, according to Cicero. What attracted me to analyze his use of gnome, meaning opinion, is my strong belief that there are some common features it shares with Isocratean doxa. The use of gnome features prominently in his histories, a historiographical work recording the origins of Greco-Persian wars and including abundant geographical and ethnographical information on Anatolia, Scythia, East and Southeast Mediterranean region. Before exploring his use further, I shall offer some insight on Herodotus' historiographical method, his definition of history as enacted inquiry, and how his method is related with his use of gnome. In heroic and didactic epic, the Muses are invested with the authority stemming from their capacity to know everything and be everywhere, according to Iliad, Book 2, 485, and to tell about the past, the present, and the future, as Hesiod in his Theogony 38 informs us. Now, in his Rome, Herodotus defines his method as an inquiry, histories apodexis, an empirical method securing chaos and subsequently opposing the destructive force of time. This empirical method, if interpreted as enactment of an inquiry involving selection, discrimination, and research into disparate source material, bears an inherently dialogic nature. Inquiry, in the sense of seeking for a cause, is an act of negotiation insofar as time sets an inextricable limitation on this search by affecting data and rendering remote events impossible to recover. Based on this limitation imposed by time upon the searches of causes, the discriminating investigator is invited to reject or accept different opinions, corresponding to or contradicting one another, and, ultimately, to form one's own opinion, gnome. Herodotus' empirical inquiry is his means to navigate through the heterogeneity of oral traditions about different times and spaces. The aim of his inquiry is to integrate these traditions within a particular narrative and to organize time and space as the basic dimensions of historical recording. Therefore, he focuses on objects, and this underpins his overarching empirical method, thus illustrating the meaning of the phrase histories apodexis as a product of enacted inquiry through autopsy. In other words, his method involves critical examination of the opinion of those who have seen, which results to the conflicting accounts of works, deeds, and achievements as signs by which the existence of players in the historical process can be remembered. His focus on objects illustrates the meaning of his phrase, histories apodexis, as a project of enacted inquiry, the enacting of which requires not only the accomplishment of great deeds, but also recordings. So far, I have given you an outline of how Herodotus defines his empirical method in recording the past. But how does Herodotus' method make use of gnome? Opinion. As Egbert Bakker noted, the important Herodotian phrase apodexastai ten gnomen is translated as perform, put in practice one's opinion, and is used frequently for situations of speech and decision-making in his narrative. In order to understand the theoretical background of the phrase and how it relates with Isocrates, we have to understand that Herodotus understands the use of apodexastai gnomen not as an expression of presentation or an expression of an opinion. Its nature is inherently dialogic and its context preponderantly communicative. As Bakker notes, it is a constructive contribution to an evolving communicative reality. But what does this entail for the Herodotean use of gnome? According to Bakker, gnome opinion is communicated to respond to other gnome or with the intention of shaping subsequent ones. At times, this opinion may be in direct conflict with other views presented in a particular context, as for example when Mardonius has spoken in favor of invading Greece. No one of the Persians present dares present an opinion against the one at hand. Sometimes Herodotus is obliged to put forth an opinion in sharp contrast to the one held by the majority. For example, there is a strong sense of conflict and difference when Herodotus writes that regarding the importance of the contribution of the Athenians to the war with Xerxes, his view will not please everybody. And I quote, "At this point, I cannot but put forth an opinion, which in fact is odious by the majority. Still, in so far as it seems to me a matter of true fact, I will not withhold it." So, according to Herodotus, without the Athenian contribution, Greece would have been subdued to Persia, despite the Spartans having achieved great deeds. Another instance of his use of opinion is when he reports his inquiry on the mysterious behavior of the Nile. "If I must, after criticizing the theories mentioned, put forth a view myself about things invisible, I will say what is to my mind the cause of the flooding of the Nile in the summer." Herodotus' personal opinion, gnome, forms part of his inquiry through autopsy on a controversial topic which seems to be more a matter of scientific proof and argument. However, Herodotus' practice is similar to that of characters in his tale outside scientific context. The enacted inquiry apparently has something in common with the enacted or performed opinion, the so-called apodexis of a gnome, with counseling and deliberation. Both deal with difference, and in that sense the essence of meaning of Herodotean inquiry dovetails with Isocratean doxa and kairos. As I mentioned earlier, when I translated Antidotus' paragraphs 183-184, Isocrates lays emphasis on the teaching of Philosophia, involving nothing less ambitious than training students in how to arrive at sound conjectures or successful doxa. By presenting the art of logos politikos as stochastic art, Isocrates revamped the challenges of political deliberation as the challenge of aiming through guesswork in the face of uncertainty. In his speech on the piece, paragraph 8, he writes that, and I quote, "In dealing with matters about which they take counsel, people ought not to think that they have exact knowledge or what the result could be, but to be minded towards these contingencies as men who indeed exercise their best judgment but are not sure that the future may hold in store." In that sense, the main challenge of deliberation is the pronouncement of a judgment in the uncertain and precarious world of politics, a conjecture that aims to hit the mark. And according to Isocrates, this is the exact meaning of the term doxa. As conjecture, doxa is a judgment which is sound and capable of hitting the right course of action. As a result, Isocrates does not lay emphasis on the orator's subsequently leader's skill with persuasion or on his or her ability to make a correct judgment in deliberation. In that sense, the deliberating orator, politician, or leader has to encounter and handle a new situation in the absence of a visible path towards solution while being equipped with a fairly oblique stumbling knowledge. In this case, the only skills that may contribute towards a steadfast orientation in all contingencies are intelligence and resourcefulness of experience. Wrapping up. So far, it became clear that one thing Herodotus and Isocrates agree upon for sure is the impossibility of acquiring exact knowledge. Herodotus might attribute it to limitation imposed by time upon the search of causes or to heterogeneity of oral traditions about different times and spaces. In turn, Isocrates might attribute it to precariousness, uncertainty, or contingencies that human existence are bound with. In terms of education and leadership, texts like Herodotus' histories and Isocrates' speeches, if used as tools in class, could offer more to students towards the provision of good judgment and self-knowledge, as well as a deeper understanding of human nature, especially when they study leadership and organizational behavior. The dilemmas and challenges, particularly psychological and emotional ones, faced by Gyges, the famous Lydian king, or Evagras, the king of Cyprus, Isocrates addresses, parallel those of senior executives. In that sense, they can be used as case studies or working examples of decision-making, thus prompting the students to reflect on the possible choices they would make. Thank you very much. I would really be happy to have your questions online, and I would like to thank you very much for your attention. Bye-bye.